Welcome to the Climate Change and Greenhouse Gases unit. In order to run an experiment with the greenhouse gas base model, we need to first identify a variable we can modify and test the effect of. The variable related to the albedo, or reflectivity, of the surface is probably the most interesting one to test. In order to make it easier to test different values of that albedo, we should first learn to add a slider. But before we get into that, go ahead and remix the base model so that you have a copy in your own gallery. Think of a name you want to give it. I'm going to name this the Greenhouse Gases Base Model with Albedo Slider. Okay, then go ahead and save that. It should now be in your gallery. So let's make sure that this is in the view we want to see. So we wanted to add a slider to control the albedo variable before running an experiment. So in order to do that, let's go into Edit Widgets, add a new widget, and select the horizontal slider. Let's give that slider a name, Albedo, since that's what we want to be testing. Now we have our albedo widget, but let's make sure that it has the right limits and everything that we want. Let's set it at a maximum of 100, since we're going to be using this as a percentage. And let's get out of Edit Widgets. And there you have your albedo slider. Now, if we want to change anything else on it or move it, we can't do this in Spaceland. We need to go back into Edit Widgets to do that. So let's say we want to make sure that the step value is just 1. Here our step size is actually 0.001. So it's a good idea to change that to whatever you want it to be. I want the albedo to go up by 1 every time, so I'm going to set that to 1. Now you can see when you move up and down, it'll go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, all the way up to 100. It's always a good idea when you're making a slider to test this out. All right, let's get out of Edit Widgets, and here we have our albedo slider. At the moment, though, it's not connected to any code, so moving this value will not change anything. We need to add some code here. So let's go down to the coding window to solar energy and find the section of the code that had to do with the albedo, or the reflectivity of the surface. So remember that with a more reflective surface, more of the solar energy is getting converted to reflected energy. That means that this is the number that's controlling how much of that solar energy changes to reflected energy. The higher the number, the more energy is reflected and the less is converted into heat. So this is where we want to put our slider value in. Let's go into the interface drawer and find the slider value block. Take that out and slide it right in where the 60 used to be. Move the code around so you can see. And make sure you select the albedo slider value. All right, now the code knows that a random number out of 100 that's less than or equal to whatever the value is of our albedo slider, which will be a percentage of the time, energy will be reflected from the surface instead of turning into heat. Now that we've added in the slider code, let's make sure everything is working right before we move on. So let's set our albedo to something in the middle, say 57. And then we'll hit forever. Now if we have a 57% albedo, then we expect roughly half the time to get a reflected energy and half the time to get a heat. We have both red and yellow orbs going up, so that's both of these are happening. Now if I set the albedo to 100, then 100% of the time we should be getting reflected energy, which means we shouldn't see any red heat going up. And that's the case. It's all gone. Now the opposite would happen if we set it to 0. All of the reflected energy would become heat. And voila, we see only red. If you don't see these changes, it's possible that you need to save or restart or check your code. Okay, so now we have this code here. We're ready to run an experiment. Use the experimental design form to design Then run an experiment that tests the results of altering the albedo variable using the slider and record your results. Run multiple tests at each setting. Do you receive different results? What patterns do you see in the collected data? What correlations do you think exist between the variable setting and the outcomes? Have fun!